Good morning and welcome. It is my privilege and honor to greet you as we gather for our sacred Sunday service, knowing that us coming together on Sundays, it's a blessing to ourselves and to our world. And I would like to especially give a warm welcome to those that are here from outside of our area. So a bit of housekeeping. We are recording this service and we will be posting it on social media to support those who not in attendance today, and also to build out our community. Because of that, please remember you can shut off your video and identify as just a name. So one of our intentions on gathering on Sundays is to create what the Quakers call a sacred gathering, a sacred space. And what that means is together we unite in a consciousness of the one that is a felt unity. Because of that intent to stay gathered, I would encourage you to refrain from using the chat function until the call for prayer is at the end of service. After service, there will be an opportunity for a 5-minute complimentary spiritual mind treatment and with a practitioner in a private Zoom room. Thank you. And so without further ado, I have the honor of introducing our guest speaker. Now, she has been an ordained Center for Spiritual Living minister since 2014, and her ministerial specialties are healing the body and the body politic. Please welcome Reverend Sara Nichols.
Good morning, everybody. I am so glad to see you. And welcome to the center this morning. I'm thrilled that you can be here. And I can't wait to talk to you and introduce myself to some of you. Some of you have been seeing me for a while, but you actually don't know who I am. And some of you know who I am, but not as a minister. So I can't wait to talk more later. And now I introduce to you our wonderful lead practitioner, Debbie Putnam, who is an amazing consciousness on the planet and even more, an amazing heart. Debbie Putnam.
Good morning. Can you all hear me? Just wave a hand if you can hear me. Okay. I'm doing special things with my technology this morning, so I have to make sure it works. Thank you. Join with me for our invocation. Sit comfortably in your chair and just feel the air around you as you settle in this space. There is one power, one presence, one infinite, all-knowing, all-present good. It is all that is, and it is all that I am. It is all that is happening here. It is all that each and every one of us is. That we are this divine presence. And today this divine presence is happening as this magnificent service, this transformative service, as the talk that is delivered so beautifully and so spirit-inspired through Reverend Sara Nichols today, as the incredible support given by Ruth Hall, by the choir, by the board, by everyone who is involved in any way in keeping this center alive, thriving, growing, and energetic. And so today we know that we are part of a thriving, energetic, growing spiritual center, that our hearts and minds are wide open to what we have to learn today, that this teaching that we get today now grows beautifully through our minds and through our week as it continues to transform us like leavening. This good is happening now, and so it is. And now, join with me on mute to read our vision, our mission, and our purpose. Our vision: we are a welcoming sanctuary community where all are accepted, valued, and supported in the global family. Mission: we inspire and nurture personal and global transformation through the teaching of science of mind. And our purpose: in joy and in love, we connect in service to all life. And now I would like to introduce our whole note choir, which is going to do a chain chant live for you this morning. So we've been practicing, it's been a lot of fun, and here we go.
There is only one of us.
In your eyes it's me I see.
There is only one of us.
You are my reflection.
There is only one. There is only one of us. In my eyes it's you I see. There is only one of us. You are my reflection. There is only one.
There is only one of us.
In your eyes it's me I see.
There is only one of us.
You are my reflection.
There is only one. There is only one of us. In your eyes it's me I see.
There is only one of us.
You are my reflection.
There is only one.
You are my reflection. There is only one.
And now for our readings. Through faith, tie your mind back to the mind of God, and in action, live as though you were guided by a supreme intelligence. The proof that one truly believes is in action. The real radical is that person who has a vision of equality and is willing to do those things that will bring reality closer to that vision. When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it makes no difference whether or not I am afraid. And now, join us for our meditation. And now for the whole note choir.
Get ready.
Well, wasn't that amazing? Wasn't it wonderful to see what it looked like back when we were singing live together in the sanctuary? And it turned out I was even in that one. I almost didn't recognize myself. And I saw my little choir scarf, which is safely tucked away, I think, in the sanctuary for us to find in the future. So that will be wonderful. Hi, everybody. I am Sara Nichols, and I am so glad to be with you here this morning. Exactly a year ago today, left my pulpit as the spiritual leader of the Center for Spiritual Living in Davis, California. And this actually is the first time in a year that I am speaking on a Sunday morning, despite efforts on the part of many people to have me do so. But I've been hanging out with you for a while now, haven't I? And I am thrilled actually to be able to tell my story to you a little and introduce myself in more detail. Many of you have gotten to know me through choir and through services just as a person that you know now. And I love you all, and I am very grateful to be with you. And there's some really old friends and colleagues also joining us today, and people watching it on the internet who have known me for years. But I want to introduce myself to all of you, to who I am today and how I got there a bit. Because there's a lot of stuff happening out there right now that is reawakening an old part of me that never went away and calling me to bring together two parts of my life that I have often pretended were separate. So I grew up in San Diego, California, and my father was an activist professor at San Diego State University. And from a very young age, I was out on protest lines with him, protesting the Vietnam War and protesting the treatment of farm workers in California. Almost every Saturday, I would go with him to a Safeway, a different Safeway, to boycott that Safeway for its for the contracts that they had and their refusal to acknowledge farm workers as a union, and Cesar Chavez, the leader of the United Farm Workers. And we started having our phones tapped by the FBI. I mean, that's provable, not just like a little delirious theory, because when the Freedom of Information Act came out later, my father requested it, and there were transcripts. There were transcripts of phone calls I had in 7th and 8th grade where I was bringing Cesar Chavez's niece to my junior high. So that was one thing that I grew up with. And then another thing I grew up with was this grandmother who was very into Carl Jung and wrote a book called Jung and Tarot. And she lectured and talked about the archetypal, the collective unconscious and the archetypes of spirit, and how the tarot deck reflected those. And she talked to me about dreams, and she talked to me about spirituality. And that was my father's mother. And I had this very political, very activist, very secular aspect that I had with my father. And then my father's mother is more spiritual, although we never called it that. And then my mom was a whole nother deal. And I ended up making my way to law school, where I met my husband. I stayed more in the part of it that my father brought me up to. I ended up in Washington, D.C., and in the room here today is one of the people that I worked with the most in Washington, D.C. I won't say her name for her privacy, but it's wonderful to see her. When I was in teaching at George Washington University Law School and also studying for a master's there, as part of a class, we had to bring an activist lawsuit. Well, not bring one. You can't exactly require someone to bring a lawsuit, but we had to prepare one. And I decided to bring it. And we sued dry cleaners for sex discrimination, for treating men and women, charging men and women different prices to clean the identical item. We sent in people with shirts, and we would send a woman in with a shirt and she'd be charged one price, and we'd send a man in with a shirt and he'd be charged a lower price for the exact same shirt to be charged it. And we made national news, and that actually got the attention of an organization called Public Citizens Congress Watch, and they offered me as a job as a lobbyist there. And I worked as an advocate in Congress on behalf of consumers, and eventually spent most of my time working for what we now call Medicare for All, and we used to call single payer healthcare there. I was a workaholic, and I was what we now often refer to as a badass. Before women were called that, I was very fierce. I was very young. I was in my 20s when I started that. And I was absolutely convinced I was right. And I was absolutely convinced anyone who wasn't on my team was wrong. Even the people who were working for universal health care but were not for Medicare for All, those were my worst enemies. And I spent quite a lot of time trying to undermine them and to prove them wrong in public. And I was also, although I believe myself to be fiercely ethical and fiercely right, I was so convinced of my own rightness that anything was justified in moving forward my cause. So I would make reporters cry and crusty old people. I would call them a sellout. I would say terrible things about them in the media. I also would lie. I remember one time telling a congressman that I was going to be on the news that night, and that I was going to be talking about something on the news, and then I could either announce that he was with us or for us, and I had no reason to believe I was going to be on the news that night. That had not occurred, and then I was on the news. And that would happen all the time for me, is that I would do this sort of bootstrappy thing where I tell one member of Congress that another member of Congress was on board and they weren't, and then they would be on board, and then I would, and so forth. And so because I very seldom paid a price for that, I actually felt very powerful, and there was a way in which I was speaking my word, right, by lying, and I would get a lot of validation for that, and it would occur. At the same time, during this time, I was married, and then I got pregnant, and I ended up transitioning to a less fierce version of my job and fewer hours in order to be a mommy. And the old Sara, sort of tarot spiritual part of me started calling to me again, and some of my friends started wanting to access that part of me somehow and talk to me about things like that. And I got really involved in an Episcopal church there, and got confirmed in that Episcopal church as an adult. I had been baptized in the Episcopal church as a youngin' baby. And I very strongly considered entering the Episcopal seminary there, talked to the priests about it and prayed on it and filled out paperwork. But then I got pregnant again, and I decided, this is not the time. And I didn't do it. And I stayed home and was a mommy. And then we moved all our family to Sacramento, California, back where my family was in California. My husband's family's all on the East Coast. My husband's also a lawyer and a public interest lobbyist. He's an environmental advocate. But he then stayed home with the babies when we got out here. And I worked in the legislature as a staffer there on healthcare. And I continued that kind of aggressive, pushing, I'm right, you're wrong, we're going to get this done. I was always on the side of truth and justice. And then we had a family member who got very, very ill. And out of privacy for him, I won't say what family member or more about that, but very, very ill for many years, a close, close, close family member. And that broke my heart. And that family member was so integral to our lives that my husband and I had to have many conversations in the morning. We would literally stand in the morning and compare whose public interest work was more important and which of us was actually going to be available for that family member that day. Well, if I don't testify, you know, people will lose healthcare coverage, and if you don't testify, the air is going to get worse, you know. And it was, the stakes seemed really high all the way around. It seemed really scary and terrible. And I started, I just had so many feelings come up about my helplessness. Here I was, this, you know, badass that could get in the media, could make things happen, could do what I wanted to do, but I could not help this family member get well. I couldn't, no matter how many doctors I went to, no matter how many places I took them, it just did not help. It didn't bring them comfort, and they were in so much pain and so much distress all the time, and I could not help. I just couldn't. And so for 5 years while I was out here in Sacramento, we looked and auditioned various churches, went to every Episcopal church in the whole area, then started going to Lutheran churches, then started branching out, then synagogues. My husband's mother was Jewish, and we just hadn't found a place. And by a series of coincidences, I was led to the Center for Spiritual Awareness in West Sacramento one day during my worst time of beginning with this. And when I walked in, I immediately started crying during the service. And I wasn't a crier. I was someone who would make you cry. I wasn't someone who was going to cry. And I knew I was home. I knew I was home. And I knew the moment I walked in on that first day that I would be a minister in that tradition. I knew I had found my right and perfect place, and that it was just, yeah, it just felt as if this is what I'd been waiting for, and it was the answer. But even though I knew I was going to be a minister, I started just grabbing hold of this teaching, went to foundations, went to the other classes because I was in pain. You know, Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith says, we are pushed by pain until we are pulled by vision. Well, I did have a little of, but mostly pain and a tiny bit of vision, right? Mostly pain. And my pain was just, I can't do anything for this most important family member of mine. I can't help them. I can't make them well. And how do I live with that? And how do I be with that? And can I make them well if I learn enough about science of mind, the teaching, the spiritual science that we teach, right? The science that our founder, Ernest Holmes, took the teachings of all the major world religions, including Jesus, the master teacher, especially Jesus, the master teacher, and took them into figuring out how do we actually make spiritual principle reliably work? How do we actually take what we know, what we want, our vision, and how do we apply these principles, and how do we have our life out picture the way we want to? And I wanted that so bad. So I was not interested in being a practitioner or a minister. I was interested in getting out of pain. And I just took class after class after class to do that. Just class after class. And I had to take a sip of water. It's emotional to remember that time. I also got into recovery during that time for food addiction and codependence. And that also helped me begin to be able to contemplate the possibility that there could be people around me who were ill or who were doing and not doing things differently from how I wanted them to, and that I could actually still be happy, which was impossible before this moment, right? Because a lot of what was driving my work way of being was that it was on me. And by the way, until a few years ago, I was convinced that if I had only worked harder in Washington, D.C., we would have Medicare for all already. I mean, absolutely convinced. Talk about megalomania, right? I also got a vision at that time. I began to get a vision as I became a practitioner in this teaching that I was a healer. And that was just a baffling vision, because this person, this family member, was still sick. This family member was sick for 9 years. This family member would lie on my body and cry and be in pain and miss everything in life. And I could not heal them. And I was sitting in a room trying to use our teaching, saying they are whole, perfect, and complete. They are whole, perfect, and complete. And I wasn't seeing them as whole, perfect, and complete. And they weren't experiencing life as whole, perfect, and complete. And I was supposed to be some freaking healer. How did that make any sense? How did that make any sense? It doesn't make any sense. But that's what I was shown. I went to ministerial school, and I had these, I became a lobbyist during that time for for the biggest union in the state, fighting, and they were implementing Obamacare at that time in the state, and I was their healthcare lobbyist. And they were a fierce union, and they literally had a part of our office which we called the war room, and we were at war in that room, and we had up on the walls the enemies of that union, right? And I'm not the one, I didn't decorate the war room or name it by then. I'm in ministerial school. I have had some change of consciousness around this. I am in the halls of the legislature, and I am behaving very differently from how I did when I'm back in Congress doing this. I am, in fact, I'm behaving very differently from how I had been in Sacramento, and people are saying, you don't seem as angry as you once did. And people who are my enemies, who are on the opposite side of what I'm doing, who are absolutely antithetical, I'm actually talking to them and asking them questions and trying to understand what they're doing. And they're going, why are you being like this? This is very strange. I don't know what to do with this, but I like this. Can I talk to you more? And I end up doing spiritual mind treatment in the halls of the legislature with people. Sometimes I even just sit in a little room that they had for nursing mothers, and people have a line out the door and come to sit with me and get spiritual mind treatment, which is our form of affirmative prayer that changes lives. And people are coming to me. I heard people I'd never met. I heard you do this. Can I sit with you? But most of the time I'm in the war room or I'm outside doing peace chants, and I'm feeling very conflicted. So finally I became a CSL minister. I left behind all that political stuff, all of it. For me, it was just, and our family member got well. They healed themselves. And things we did helped them. Helped put them in a context where they could teach themselves how to heal themselves. But that's their story, not mine, right? My story is how I dealt with that and the pain I went through and what I went through on it. Coming to the Centers for Spiritual Living, I just was done with pushing. I was into the power of consciousness. I was into the power of prayer. I really didn't see that it had happened, right? I had pushed and pushed and pushed for universal health care and Medicare for all, and it had not happened. And now it was time to let consciousness do that, to let the power of life, to let a power greater than all of this do it. because I had been moving my feet without treating. So then I started for several years essentially treating without moving my feet. So I started praying and knowing the truth and holding it in consciousness and getting the feeling of it, and not actually being out on the picket lines very much, or, you know, I'd still vote, I'd still read the papers, which is not true of all of us. A few years ago, I read, I saw on YouTube, Marianne Williamson, before she was a candidate for anything, speaking at the Harvard Divinity School. And it made a big impression on me, because what she talked about there was that that in the civil rights movement, spirituality was an integral part of what was changing hearts and minds and the country, and allowing us to let go of segregation, and allowing us to let go of the institutionalized discrimination that was on the books then, right? Not hidden discrimination and systemic racism that we have now, but that was obvious and on the books. And that spirituality was an integral part of it, because in the African American community, there has never been a separation of politics and spirituality. It has been together. And so you had Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and you had people singing, and you had scriptural underpinnings, and you had the nonviolent protests, and all of that integrated. But as we came out of the civil rights movement and the 60s into the 70s, what happened is there was sort of a bifurcation by coast and a little bit by race, where you had on the still African American people integrating spirituality or religion and politics. And on the East Coast, this is an overgeneralization, and she said so too, but it's easier to understand it. On the East Coast of the United States, you had a lot of white people coming out of that movement time, being energized by the civil rights movement, who stayed very engaged in politics, but decoupled from spirituality and thought of it as beside the point and as a distraction. And the people who stayed, whites who were in spirituality, became more and more associated with the right wing and the evangelical movement, and they were political, and they were organized, and they were fighting for what they wanted. But there was a more liberal branch of white people on the East Coast who were very, very atheistic and very angry at religion and very angry at that. And then overgeneralization, but over here on the West Coast, and I'm using my left hand, I don't know, it's probably opposite to you, but anyway, on the West Coast, a spirituality movement, a New Age movement that birthed amongst predominantly white people, that was actually spiritual but not political, and very much about knowing the truth and staying within, and peace and chanting and meditation and all those things. And so here I had literally physically been on the East Coast in politics, had come to the West Coast and had gotten immersed in spirituality, become a spiritual, become a minister in this tradition. But all of that is within me, right? And so when I kept separate from myself and tried to hold parts of myself as if they weren't related, that was actually very damaging for me and very hard to do. Now we are in a time when we are being called, all of us, to integrate the spiritual and the political. And for those of us here at the Centers for Spiritual Living, we are convinced of oneness, right? We are convinced that there is no such thing as separation. There's no such thing as evil. Evil starts and stops right here. And we are all one And what we call God is not necessarily a man in the sky with a beard, but is that power, that life, that heart, that mind, that is all things, that makes up everything in the known and the unknown world. Which means, by definition, there is not something out there called politics that is separate from us. I'm going to say that again. It means, by definition, there is not something out there called politics that is separate from me. Because I am connected to all that is. Everything that is occurring is an expression of my consciousness, good and bad. That is good news and bad news, right? It can be very distressing to recognize that what is out picturing in the world today is a reflection of my consciousness. I am participating in the consciousness that is allowing everything to occur. Unconsciously, I am. And the more you dive into our teachings and our classes and all the great classes that Reverend Sharon is teaching right now and will teach, and Reverend Patricia, you will learn how this works and how we can do that. But what makes us special, what makes the Centers for Spiritual Living so key in this time, is that we know how to work with consciousness. We know how to do this stuff. We know that beliefs are what drives the outpicturing of what occurs in the real world. And we know that it is possible to change your belief structure, to change consciousness from within, and have a new world picture itself. Out picture. We know that. We know that for a fact. That's what we teach and that's what we experience. But we also know, here's my science of mind teaching symbol. Can you see it? It's probably not very big. I'm going to do this on the share screen. I'm going to do a whiteboard for you. So we have a science of mind teaching symbol. And up here is the idea, the seed that pops in. This is the soil. And down here is the plant, the result of what we've planted. And when we do our spiritual mind treatment or our prayers or our working with consciousness or even our political work, we often spend a lot of time and attention up here planting what we want. We plant peace, we plant justice, we plant oneness, we plant love, we plant kindness, right? Up here, justice, and we focus on that plant, that seed that we're putting in. But down here in this soil, sometimes we don't spend enough attention on the weeds that are in that soil that are choking the seeds that we've planted and out picturing something else down here. What we're learning now in with George Floyd's death, with protests around the country, with toppling of monuments, we are engaging in a national weeding that is occurring here. And people are being forced to weed. They're being forced. I don't have the drawing skills or the patience to show you that, but we are being called upon to actually get into that soil and see where our blinders have been and see where our consciousness has been choked by racism, and where we, as white people in particular, where we have not seen the weeds that have choked us, the privilege that we have had, the extent to which we have allowed these beautiful seeds to be planted over and over and over again to go into a choked field of weeds and to produce police brutality, to produce violence to produce environmental racism, all the effects in life or in anything. This applies whether it has to do with what we might call political, what's happening in the world out there, or what's happening in me in terms of my body and what is out picturing in my body, right? Because a big part of my story, some of you have heard about, is that I also use these tools as a healer to heal my body, to heal myself from, I'm 100 pounds lighter than I was at my top weight, and I'm maintaining that weight loss. And I went through 2 years of barely being able to walk more than a block without extreme pain, and I can backpack again now at the age of 59. And I went from I have a wrist that has all these pins and metal in it that I was told was never going to be able to bend again more than this or in this, and I can do this with it. And so I have used these tools, I have used this consciousness to outpicture the body and the health and the life and the abundance and the joy and the connection that I have wanted. And now I am being called upon to also use them to participate collectively in in doing my work and pulling my weeds and out picturing the world that works for everyone. The world that is that our teaching and our organizational design says we want, says we're here to do. And I'm here to learn how to actually do that. I have been talking a long time, haven't I? There is more that I want to say, but I don't want to overwhelm you. I can't, Patrick, I see you clapping, but I don't know if that means I'm clapping because it's over or I'm clapping because I've been enjoying it. Let's take this message into prayer. And I'm just going to close with a couple of quotes as I go into and take the prayer requests. I am reading this book, Love Without End, Jesus Speaks by Glenda Green, which is a book where Jesus came to this painter for a sitting in the late 90s and requested that she paint him. And then she wrote down the things he spoke, and it's incredible. And in it, I have learned that what Ernest Holmes, our founder, taught us would be more accurately called science of heart than science of mind. Because Jesus, the master in this, says that mind equals polarity and heart equals infinity. And the power of the mind only works if it is a servant to the heart. And that our only choice as human beings, our most important, we have lots of choices, but our only important choice as human beings is whether to be love or not to be love. We are love. That is our divine inheritance. We are love. We can't do anything about that, but unless we choose to be love, we will not experience that power. All the polarities that we see in politics and in the outpicturing of the world, and maybe even in our families and lives and bodies, all those polarities can end instantly from the power of heart. Instantly. The power of love and being love and choosing love is so powerful that the instruction then to the mind for the spiritual mind treatment that I'm about to do always will manifest. It will command rather than control. It will dissolve. It will dissolve conditions. Dissolve them instantly. That is how powerful the heart is. Love ends duality, and it has no opposites, said this Jesus. Once love has become your choice as well as your nature, all potential for duality is erased from your life and you are given command. I'm going to leave you with these thoughts. I asked, what should I love first? And he replied, whatever is in front of you. What do I do first? Whatever is facing you. Who do I help now? The next person with whom you speak. I want to ask you to make a choice to be love or not, and to use these principles that you have learned on how to work with spirit to be love, and to pull your weeds by learning how to forgive everyone that you are judging right now. And I'm talking to myself. All right, let's take this into prayer. We have a couple ways to take prayer requests here at this center. You can put them in the chat, and people have already begun to do that, or you can go to our webpage at SCSL.org and you can enter them there. And we also have practitioners who will stay after and pray with you in a separate private Zoom room that we will plop you into with them. If you would like to sit and have our version of prayer, which we call spiritual mind treatment, they will do a free our gift to you 5-minute laser thing that will transform your life. All right. So take a breath with me and just drop into that love, that heart, that only thing happening here. All powerful, all knowing, all ever present, beyond time, beyond space, beyond limitation, beyond lack, beyond precedent, beyond.
Wow. Well, so this is our offering time, and we are offering you an opportunity to give. You may give 3 different ways. You can give through our website and it's here on the website at www.sacscsl.org using PayPal, debit, or credit card. You look for the donate button on the home page, or you may give by sending checks mailed to SCSL mailing address shown on the screen. Just remember, we do not have the P.O. box anymore. So, our abundance affirmation. Please stay muted as we read together. I give thanks for the abundance that is mine to share and my willingness to share it, knowing that my gift returns to me multiplied many times over. And so it is.
And now it's time for our announcements. We have a bunch. The 5 Pillars of a Spiritual Life, which Reverend Sharon has been teaching every Tuesday, is open for one more class this week, and it is a drop-in class, so you are welcome to join this Tuesday morning from 10:30 to 12:30. We have started our Wisdom Wednesdays, as most of you know, and they have been amazing. We've had Sara and Jaime, and anyway, it's been great. So the next one is July 8th from 6:30 to 7:30, and those are often more participatory. They often give an opportunity for you to discuss the topic or for you to participate, as we did with Jaime, in workshop activities. So we welcome you to those. Your midweek boost. We also have visioning coming up on July 20th, and we have restarted visioning every month. We'll tell you more about that as it gets closer. It is an amazing process of revealing yourself to yourself. We have Kindred Connection, which is how we connect with each other as a community, just to hang out and chat and have fun and bring a lot of puns, I hear. on Fridays from 6:30 to 7:30. And it's all in this, all of these things occur with this same Zoom ID, I believe, in this same Zoom room, as they call it. And coming soon, we don't have exact dates yet, is a book study on the spontaneous fulfillment of desire, harnessing the infinite power of coincidence by Deepak Chopra. Just the book cover is really beautiful. We also have a matching donation opportunity. I have been blessed to be able to donate a gift of $900 to the center when this $900 is matched by all of your loving and abundant donations. Now, of course, this is different from the tithe, from just the regular giving, and this is an opportunity to support our center continuing, even when we're back in the sanctuary doing our live streaming, so that people can attend our service who maybe are not able to attend in person for many reasons.